Hello everyone, I'm Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Animal Sanctuary, and welcome to Royals at the Ranch for Thursday, August 18th, 2022. This is our one-year wrap-up. I've actually been doing a weekly Royals at the Ranch show for over 1 year. I started in July of 2021, and now we are in August of 2022. And I'm not wrapping up the series completely. I'm just going to shift the format from weekly to monthly, and on 3 weeks out of the month, we're going to have Cornsnake Corral. I'm going to start a similar series about corn snakes. And a few people are excited about that, but I'm not ready to totally give up working with Royals. When I started working with Royals about 2.5 years ago, I had already been working with snakes for over 2 years as an animal trainer and behaviorist, and Royal pythons were really not on my radar. I was working with Australian pythons, lots of Morelia, and some corn snakes. I was working with carpets and corns. And I added royal pythons after a couple of years of doing that because I found out they're the #1 pet species of snake worldwide. And as I started doing more coaching, more online training for people that were snake owners, and more behavior consulting for snake owners, I realized a lot of the animals that I was being asked to consult on were royal pythons. And so I decided that I would learn more about them. And then I also had an alternative motive, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. So I added Python regius to our family of snakes in March of 2020. And the initial intent was to do a preference test of living space. I had heard so much debate among reptile keepers as to what type of living habitat was best for Python regius. And some people actually went in so far as to try to say that they knew what the Python regius preferred, but I couldn't find any research that any actual scientific preference testing had been done. And there's a scientific method to doing preference tests. So I decided that I would get a pair of royal pythons. I got two, a moon and Amanette. I got them from two different breeders in two different states. One was male and one was female. They were both piebald. And I decided that I would set up this preference test. So my question was, when given the opportunity to choose between a rack tub or a furnished PVC habitat, where would they spend most of their time? Very, very simple. And I could have done that by connecting a rack to a habitat, or what I chose to do was put a rack tub with a lid on it and a hole cut in the top inside a furnished habitat because I don't own racks. So I had to just use a shoebox tub as an alternative. And then following that experiment or that preference test, as a trainer and behaviorist, I began to study the overall temperament, personality, and behavior tendencies of Python regius, as well as their trainability and learning potential. And I added more to our family. And I have become quite enamored with this species over time. They still aren't my absolute favorite snake species, but I love them a lot. And so I intend to continue to work with them, to continue to help families with royal pythons. And I intend to continue publishing monthly videos about the royal pythons, as well as including them in my other videos, which are general snake videos and training videos. They have taught me so much, and I've grown to really appreciate them, not only as a species, but I appreciate each one as individuals, and I'm thankful for all that they have taught me and continue to teach me. This episode will highlight some of my takeaways from my experiences with royal pythons in each of the main topic categories that have typically been included in other Royals at the Ranch episodes. In this episode, I will first briefly go over the original project and what I discovered with the two individuals that I personally observed. I'm going to highlight for you some of the takeaways from our behavior breaks, some things that I learned, and some things I think are important for you to remember about Python regius behavior. I'm going to go over highlights from our training talks, important things that I think that you should take away from this series about animal training in general, but specifically with Royals. And then I'll do the same thing with our words on welfare segment. The habitat preference test was my initial reason for adding two royal pythons to our family. They were a moon and an Amanette. They were 4 to 6 months old when I added them. A moon is the male and Amanette is the female. And just briefly, I set them up with a furnished tub like they had with their breeder. And then I put that tub into a 3x2x2 PVC enclosure, fully furnished, with substrate, a humid hide, a large water bowl, other hides, climbing things, branches. You see one of those pictured here in the upper right, and Aminette is on her branch. Just in quick review, what came of that preference test was that maladaptive behaviors when the snakes had access only to the tub were observed in both snakes. Maladaptive behaviors when they had access to the tub and the opportunity to also be within the PVC enclosure were not present. Those maladaptive behaviors were things like striking at the walls, pacing, nose rubbing, edging, and pushing on the lid to get out as examples. Where did the snakes spend most of their time when given the choice? Each of them spent the majority of their time in the fully furnished habitat over the tub when given the opportunity to be in either one. Did they use the tub at all? Yes. Amun used the tub as a hide when he was resting and for shedding. I would find all of his sheds in the tub. And Aminette only used it as a toilet area. And then given access to both a tub and enclosure, how long did it take for the snakes to leave the tub and use the enclosure? Less than 1 hour from when I set this up. So the first few days they were here, they were in the breeder tub only. And then they were briefly in a chondro tub because they were exhibiting so many stereotypies and maladaptive behaviors. The first 2 nights that I didn't feel it was ethical to allow that to continue when I knew that there was an opportunity to give them choices, and I put them in a chondro tub, and really the only difference was they could see out the front. There was a little more space and there were things for them to climb on. The stereotypy stopped, and then after a few days, maybe a month in that, I put the breeder tub into the PVC enclosure that was fully furnished and just sat back and watched. I didn't try to interfere. I just observed their behavior to find out where they chose to spend most of their time. And they basically abandoned any type of tub, and they were using the enclosure at large other than to shed and as a toilet area. So our behavior breaks covered lots of different topics. During several episodes, we broke away from the regular content to learn about a behavior topic. And here are some of the important takeaways from those breaks. Well, Python regius display a wide variability in temperament and personality under captive management. It became very clear that there was so much genetic diversity in the species that it is likely causing a lot of behavioral diversity based on genetics, based on development, based on the way that they were raised at the individual breeders' locations, and then based on learning and experience prior to them getting here. And that's going to ring true for learning and experience and all of these other things prior to them getting into your homes. A wide range of different personalities, temperaments, and behaviors. The species is generally shy, typically hides while resting, and that's typically all day long, and then they become very active after dark, moving around their enclosure, coming out of hiding, getting into hunting behaviors like moving around the enclosure, getting into ambush positions either up high or down low. So just activity at nighttime before retreating to their hiding place during the day and sleeping or resting all day. And when I say hiding place, I don't necessarily mean a physical hide. Sometimes they would hide under things in the enclosure or between furnishings and the enclosure wall, but they would hide to rest. They climb when given opportunities. They seek out humid microclimates when they have the opportunity to do that. But I've only ever seen 2 swim or soak in pools of water. And I'm working with 25 right now. And I personally only have 1 that has gotten into his water dish. And actually, I've witnessed him swimming. And then I have a client who has 1 that soaks quite frequently in the water dish. Their species typical anti-predator behavior is to freeze hide, which is often mistaken for docility or comfort and relaxation by people who don't realize the snakes are actually fearful and in distress. This was also backed up by a paper that was published during the couple of years that I've worked with royal pythons that studied the anti-predator behavior of 3 species of pythons, including Python regius, and it also confirmed that their default anti-predator behavior is to freeze hide, although you will always have outliers that may strike or may retreat or escape. While they tend to be on the shy and reactive end of the temperament spectrum, there are outliers who may be bold and proactive and display anti-predator behaviors such as active escape or striking. And depending on genetics, temperament, learning, experience, and living environment, Royals can have personalities ranging from shy, bold, reactive to proactive, and be generally apathetic, or they could be curious, they could be pessimistic, or optimistic, and they can be slow or quick to engage in and successfully complete problem-solving tasks. So I couldn't tell you, based on my observations over the last 2.5 years, most Python regius will be this certain way if you randomly choose one. There is so much variability with temperament and personality and cognitive abilities within the species that it's really important that you ask yourself what your intent is for the individual animal that you're adding to your home, and then you work with the breeder to find a good match. So temperament and personality is very unpredictable based on appearance alone. And when choosing an animal, work with a breeder who can answer your behavior questions. Also, ideally, behavior questions about any siblings from other clutches, any clutch mates, and the parents or grandparents if they know. I feel I would be remiss if I didn't mention specifically feeding behavior and what I observed when our Python regius were actually hungry. They were awake earlier in the evening or stayed awake longer in the morning. They moved around their habitat more. They were hyper reactive to motion, alert to the slightest movement and orienting towards it immediately. They would settle into an ambush position on the ground or up high on a tree branch or ledge, and they would move locations more frequently than normal when they were trying to increase their opportunities to acquire or access food. They would eat very, very frequently during certain times and very infrequently during other times. Mine eat frozen thawed prey of varied meal sizes and types, such as mice, rats, quail, and a couple have taken reptilings. They have unusual strike behaviors, which include missing the prey, striking several inches away from the prey, either too high, too low, to the left or right, and striking repeatedly before finally grabbing and capturing the prey. A recent paper actually confirmed that strike performance in Python regius gets less efficient as juveniles mature. So the behavior that we often see as royal python keepers, where they miss their food, they have to strike several times at the food, or they're way off with their strikes, or they hesitate with their strikes, is actually documented in this paper. I went over it in another video, and there is no explanation. There's no consensus right now as to why they behave that way. We also had training talks, and I want to remind everyone that training is just one way to learn. It's kind of a formal way for organisms to learn something. Learning is a change in an animal's behavior or thoughts as a result of experiences, and you can think of training as guiding the experiences that animals have in order for them to learn to do specific tasks or behaviors. Our training talks included things like target training, passive habituation, gradual desensitization, transitioning habitats, and cooperative care. So the target training videos that we did in our Royals at the Ranch segments included things like step-by-step target training specifically for shy snakes and for confident snakes, and then links to longer videos in my collection where you can learn these things in classes. We went over how to allow snakes to become accustomed to their environment in their own time, which we call passive habituation. We went over how to use approach and retreat to set up environments for successful habituation using gradual desensitization. We have a part 3 that's coming up that I haven't forgotten about, and that's probably going to be our September episode. We went over transitioning habitats using gradual methods, using intermediate methods, which are a little bit gradual and a little bit abrupt, all the way to what could happen if you do very abrupt moves. And we went over what cooperative care is, the benefits of cooperative care, and how to implement it. These are all included in some of our episodes, as well as in longer videos that I've done about snakes in general. We had words on welfare segments that included stress, enrichment, choice-based interactions, resiliency, welfare science, and lots more. We went over that there's good, tolerable, and toxic stress, what handling and transition stress are, and how stress relates to behavioral health. We talked about the types of enrichment, which according to the AZA include cognitive, dietary, physical, sensory, and social. We went over how to accomplish enrichment in and out of the snake's habitat. We talked lots and lots about choice-based interactions and how important that is on well-being for the animal. That includes cooperative care, things like approach and retreat, giving the animals agency, choice, and control, allowing them to opt in or opt out of activities that we would like them to engage in. And we went over when something is a want versus a need. In other words, when we just want to hold our snake or want to do something with our snake, we should be giving them the opportunity to consent to that or not. A need would be an emergency, like we have to evacuate, or maybe the snake has to go to the vet for a medical issue. We talked lots about resiliency, giving the snakes appropriate challenges that they're able to overcome, accomplishing problem-solving tasks, and how that can build confidence. We talked about welfare science, what that is and what the difference is between welfare and well-being, and how that can impact behavioral health. That behavioral health not only includes the physical body, but the emotional state of the animal as well, or the psychological health of the animal. We also talked a little bit, I think, about emotions. And if we haven't, I'm going to be talking about that more, and that there's a difference between feelings. Those are subjective experiences that we can't possibly know. We went over emotions, which are physiological responses to environmental stimuli, like fear is a good example. When it comes to welfare and environmental mismatches, it's something that I alluded to in many of the episodes, and it's a topic that I'm going to focus on in some future episodes. Mismatches are when the snake has developed in or was raised in an environment different from the one they end up living in, and it causes lots and lots of psychological and behavioral issues, or it can. Mismatches can also occur when the snake has a temperament making them unsuited for what's expected of them in the environment and with the people that they're currently living with. And it also includes when prior traumatic experiences are causing the snake to be unable to cope with their current situation. Avoiding mismatches can be done by obtaining a snake raised in an environment likely to support their success in the environment they're intended to live in. So in other words, a snake that's only been raised in Iraq all its life is really only being set up to succeed to live in other situations where they're going to live in Iraq. If a snake is going to a pet home, to an educational program, to a zoo, it's really helpful if they're raised in an environment that prepares them to succeed in those environments. So in other words, they would have some considerate handling, some environmental stimulation, and perhaps some training. If we investigate the temperament of the snake and their current behavior for suitability and lifestyle that we intend to have for it before we get the snake, that can avoid lots of mismatches between snakes that just aren't prepared for the life we expect them to live in. And then if we can obtain a history of prior experiences, prior learning, and environmental circumstances for the snake that we're thinking of adding to our family, we can make a determination if it's going to be possibly a good fit or not. Well, where do we go from here then? We're wrapping up our weekly episodes, but we are going to have monthly episodes. I've come to really be fond of these Python regius. They're not going anywhere. I have many Python regius you haven't even met yet. I have many projects going on that I haven't even discussed yet. So you're going to be meeting more Python regius and learning more as I learn more about them. Episodes of Royals at the Ranch will be monthly starting in September of 2022, and Royals at the Ranch will air on the third Thursday of each month. The content's going to be the familiar content segments that you're used to, the things that we've just reviewed. And then new content as topics arise, and follow-up content on continuing episodes like the Gradual Desensitization series, Part 3 is coming, are going to happen in the future. In addition to that, our Royals will be included in our general video content along with our other snake species, and we welcome your questions about Royals and topic suggestions as long as they're applicable to training and behavior, because that's my area of expertise. In summary, Following over a year of weekly Royals at the Ranch episodes, the show is moving to monthly. I will continue to do periodic Ask Lori episodes for the new Ball Python Keepers group. And yes, that's the name of their group. I typically do not call Royal Pythons ball pythons because I just don't think it's respectful to call them by a name that is a behavior they do when they are fearful, distressed, experiencing anxiety, and is one of their natural anti-predator behaviors. I prefer to call them Python regius or Royal Pythons. But this group is for new ball python keepers, and I'm happy to support them by answering questions. We're going to catch up on all of the past Royals at the Ranch content by summarizing it and reviewing it in some of the future episodes. But I expect you to be caught up on the details of all that content by watching all the past episodes before you dive into the monthly episodes. Our Royals are going to be included in our general content, and they have been sprinkled into our general content along the way. I try to tag them in videos and put any videos that they're featured in the Python Regius playlist. I want you to join us for Cornsnake Corral starting August 25th, 2022. This is going to air on the first, second, and fourth Thursdays of each month. Why not the third Thursday? Because I'm reserving that for our Royals. I have so much more to learn about Python Regius and snakes in general that our content will continue to grow along with my knowledge. Everyone's favorite segment, Royals in Your Homes, will be coming to you this month as a standalone episode shortly after this year-end wrap-up airs. I am going to compile a lot of the content that you all sent in over this past year into a music video, so you can hopefully relax to some music and watch Royals in Your Homes as just a video by itself without having to listen to me talk. Thank you so much for your continued interest in Python Regius and snake training and behavior in general. You can reach me at my email address, behavioreducationllc@gmail.com, through my website at behavioreducation.org. I am on patreon.com at behavioreducation. You can reach me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course here on YouTube. Until next time, everybody please remember to always be kind and love your animals.